Diversity, judgment, and anger. As we pave our path to live courageously, one of the things that requires an incredible amount of courage is to seek to connect with others when we disagree, argue, and fight. When we face these situations, it's easy for us to accept the differences, create an us and them construct that keeps us divided and isolated. It's our ability in those moments to say, hey, I know you're angry, but can we talk? Or, I know we don't agree, but can I hear more of what you have to say? That takes effort and courage, but can eventually lead us to create more connections with each other. It takes courage because we as humans fear rejections, indifference, and judgments, and reaching out means we might have to face that front on and seek to connect anyway. When we can empathize with the needs of different individuals and figure out together how we might fulfill the different needs, we might be able to move forward as humanity. We are social beings and we cannot live alone. In the most challenging of times, it's important for us to be able to reach out and compassionately support each other despite our differences. So, the first step to building our skills to empathize with and support each other is to become aware of our automatic tendencies to judge others and create an us and them construct when differences show up. In this lesson, we'll be exploring what judgments are and why they develop, and how anger might show up as a result of these judgments. We'll be exploring how we can work together with them. So, let's begin. As you look around in your school community, you can probably say that your community is composed of different kinds of people, of different ages, gender, personalities, and skills, and for some of you, nationalities, religions, and languages. Sometimes diversity is great because you get to discover different kinds of perspectives, and when working in teams, different skills can come together to create something that you could have not created on your own. But you can most likely also remember a time or two, or maybe more, when diversity didn't work in your favor. Perhaps you and some teammates had different standards for how hard to work on a project. That's not fun, right? Perhaps you and your friends may have different ideas about what being on time means. Ugh, it's so annoying. Perhaps you and your classmates have different opinions on abortion rights and end up arguing. That doesn't feel good. So, when was the last time when you got frustrated or angry at someone else? What happened? What difference between you and the other person has led to the situation? What did the frustration or anger feel like in your body? What thoughts did you have about the other person? So, for me, I'm going to share an episode from several years back when I was teaching a unit on evolution in my middle school science class. Some students who practiced Christianity did not believe in evolution and argued how evolution was not true during every science class over a couple weeks, which made it very difficult for me to run the class smoothly. The difference was not only the beliefs around evolution, but also our standards about what was an appropriate behavior in class. I was frustrated and felt a burning sensation in my chest and tightness in my back constantly. I was thinking how rude the students were being to argue in the middle of the class and inconsiderate for others' learning, and how they were selfish and self serving. So, what's your episode like? You might find that sometimes a difference can lead to conflict between yourself and others. And during these episodes, you find yourself having judgments about the other party. So, for me, my judgments that I had for my students were that they were rude and inconsiderate and selfish. So sometimes we can have judgments about others even when we don't really know them, but simply by looking at them. So, for instance, look at this photo of this person and see if you can imagine three details about her life. Did you come up with any? Well, I came up with she's a farmer, she's not very friendly, and she has a small cottage where she stays in the countryside. Mind you, I don't know this person. So, you can do an activity on identifying stereotypes and biases in the diversity activity section of the website to find out your stereotypes and biases even more. What you'll find is that oftentimes we make judgments about different people simply by their looks. So, what are judgments? Judgments involve the processes of evaluating and labeling something. So, for example, if I look at you and say, I like your clothes, or I don't like your haircut, then I'm evaluating. And if I say that your clothes are trendy and your haircut's bad, then I'm putting labels on them. They're both forms of judgments. Now, judgments are also often casted automatically or unconsciously, and we're not even aware of it. Usually, when we are judgmental, we tend to see the world in simple black and white terms. We put the objects of judgment in one of the dichotomous boxes, such as something is either good or bad, beautiful or ugly, or desirable or undesirable, or pleasant or unpleasant. So, a little more on judgments. Judgments operate like a lens. It's as if we're wearing a pair of glasses and we see the world through the lens. The color of the world that we see around us depends on the color of the lens that we look through. And the color of the lens or the types of judgments that we have are shaped by our beliefs and previous experiences. This means that depending on our backgrounds, we have different color lens through which we see the world. Depending on the different colors of our lens, we cast different judgments on the various aspects of the world we see around us. These different judgments influence how we interpret our experiences. In other words, how we feel and think about our experiences in this world. So, what are some things in our life that can influence the color of the lens that we look through? In other words, what shapes our beliefs? This may be shaped by our education, what your parents taught you, your community norms, religion, your experiences, and so on and so forth. Since no one person has identical experiences, we can say that each of us has a different color lens through which we see the world. So, for example, let's say that there is a person and she has different beliefs, such as in order to be beautiful, one needs to be thin, or it's important to get high grades, or we need to pay respect to the elderly. Now, these are beliefs that this person identifies to be truths. Now, these beliefs are foundations for the judgments that this person makes and colors the lens through which she sees reality. As she constantly looks through the lens, she's constantly judging how the reality matches with her beliefs. Depending on how reality matches or doesn't match with her beliefs, different judgments are cast on the reality. So, for example, if there's a person who believes that getting high grade is important and is a sign of success, and she's confronted with another individual who gets low test scores but spends a lot of quality time with friends, then this is a situation in which reality does not match her belief system. The judgment that is cast on this person then is that she is a loser. Now, let's say that there is another individual whose belief is that creating meaningful friendship is important and is a sign of success. And if she encounters the same person with low test scores and spends a lot of quality time with friends, then this is a case in which her beliefs about success match the reality, and she would judge the person to be a winner. The key here is that the reality is the same, but depending on who's seeing the reality and what beliefs they may have, the judgment of the reality is different. Now, this means that reality is objective, but judgments are subjective. And such judgments can also be cast upon yourself. So, for example, if you grew up in a belief system that crying is a sign of weakness and experience a very painful experience of a death of a family member and cry as a result, you might judge yourself to be weak and might try to stop yourself from crying. Again, instead, you grow up in a belief system that crying is important for expressing sadness and is a normal human behavior, then your judgment of yourself would be quite different. So, from these examples, it's clear that a judgment often says more about the person who makes the judgment than about the person about whom the judgment is made. A reality can be interpreted very differently by two individuals with different beliefs. The reality is the same, but different judgments are created. And this means that a judgment says more about the beliefs held by the person who makes the judgment. So, in my example, when I judge my students to be inconsiderate and rude, then that says more about my beliefs that students shouldn't argue with teachers during class time and shouldn't take up others' learning time with things that are not part of the curriculum than about who my students are as people. In fact, another teacher with very different values may have very different judgments about the exact same students. So, our tendency to judge, if we are unaware of it, can be dangerous when we live and learn together in a diverse community. Reality is extremely complex because, for example, if we were to look at students in a school, each person comes with a unique set of skills and experiences, beliefs and personalities, and so on and so forth. And judging reduces reality by filtering it through a certain belief system and puts the complex reality into a small box. The box would contain labels such as bad or loser or failure based on how they match the belief system of the person casting judgments. So, for example, certain students may be judged good or bad based on the grades that they get, although they are so much bigger than this criteria. And by judging, reality can only operate and move within the limits of this box. And in a diverse community, such limiting view of each other is a source of conflict. So, to illustrate how we tend to distort the complexity of reality by casting judgments, think about how we define beauty. The popular media today depicts beauty standard to be skinny and to have flat stomach, especially for females. But was this always the case? In the Renaissance time, round body with full hips were considered to be beautiful. This means that what we judge to be beautiful changes over time, as well as many different beliefs and values. So there is no single right answer or truth to the standard of beauty, and reality is complex. Also, you may have heard of the terms collectivistic cultures and individualistic cultures. Some collectivistic cultures in the world place importance in the community over individuals and make decisions based on community well being over individualistic ones. On the other hand, individualistic cultures place more importance on the individuals, and individual fulfillment is more important than communal harmony. Now, which culture did you grow up in? Which culture do you relate more with? Which one is right? They're both right, right? Reality cannot be defined by one single cultural value, but is defined by multiple cultural values. Reality is complex. So, in my class, I do an activity in which I get students to stand in a line from strongly agree to strongly disagree for different prompts. So, for example, I give a prompt like, I believe that euthanasia or physician assisted suicide to be legal, or I believe that adults have the right to carry a concealed handgun. Usually, I have students standing at many different points on the line. This is the complexity of reality, that depending on what experiences individuals have had in the past, their beliefs differ. But then judgments come into play. Let's say that for a prompt, I believe that euthanasia or physician assisted suicide to be legal. I may have someone standing at strongly agree, saying that this is vital because when the quality of life is so poor with illness, so much so that it feels better to end it, then ending life should be allowed. On the other hand, I might have another person that strongly disagree who believes that legalizing euthanasia can blur the line between that and murder. A usual response to this situation is that these two individuals automatically judge each other. The judgments that they cast upon the other person is that they are wrong and I am right. When disagreements arise, this is quite a natural response as we all have a compulsion to be right because it feels good, safe, and secure. And when we have the compulsion to be right, this also leads to our compulsion to control, which is to demand that the world should be like the way they believe to be right and shouldn't be like the way that their opponent believes to be right. And control the environment around them. What happens when you're told that you're wrong and the world shouldn't be like the way you wish it to be? Doesn't that make you feel angry? Now, at this point, we'll be shifting our focus to understanding more about anger. If you wish to take a break, feel free to do so. Pause the video and continue after getting a nice cup of tea or coffee. Now, can you remember the last time you felt anger that involved someone else? What happened? What kinds of judgments were cast on each other? What did anger feel like in your body? And how did you react to it? You may have a habit for how you react to anger. Let's spend a little bit of time discussing anger because when it's expressed poorly, it can reinforce judgments for each other and deepen conflicts between individuals. Now, some of you may have a tendency to react explosively to anger. This means that when anger builds up, you might react with abrupt and intense verbal or physical aggression that at times may be disproportionate to the trigger. On the other hand, some of you may have a tendency to react passively to anger. This means that anger feels so dangerous or destabilizing that you do absolutely everything to avoid emotion and conflicts that might incite anger. These are two extreme ways of reacting to anger. Now, if you tend to be on the explosive end, then there's a need to de escalate emotion, soothe oneself, and make wise decisions in the moment and quickly forgive others. On the other hand, if you tend to be on the passive end, you need to tolerate the experience of anger more fully and find assertive ways of expressing your feelings and your needs. Reacting to anger in either explosive or passive ways can exacerbate division and isolation between individuals. In order to create more connections in the midst of individual differences, it's important to respond in a balanced and assertive way to anger. Now, is anger all bad? I shared previously how poor expression of anger can lead to further divisions and isolations between individuals. We have seen poor expressions of anger globally where violence and wars occur between individuals and groups. But we also know that anger can crystallize motivation and mobilize us to act for a cause. For example, if you believe in gender equality, anger that this is not being realized can mobilize you to act for this cause. As we discussed in the emotions unit, it doesn't work to demonize the experience of anger and try to push it away or out. We need to accept the experience of anger even though it doesn't feel good. We need to care for anger as we care for a stomach ache with care and kindness and make a commitment not to create additional suffering for ourselves or others. Now, one thing that can help us to respond in a balanced way to anger is to take responsibility for our anger. What does this mean? Oftentimes, when we get angry, the mind is focused on the object of anger. We tend to point our fingers and say, she made us angry, or what he did or said made me angry, and put blame on the other party. However, what if we were to think that the seed of anger lies within us all the time? This means that, for example, when an argument arises between you and your friend, then the target of our frustration merely stimulates the seed rather than plant the seed of anger. This means that the experience of argument or the judgment that's cast upon you by the other party is feeding the water to the seed of anger and makes your anger grow. However, the seed was always planted within you because of your previous experiences and beliefs. The previous experiences and beliefs have created a lens of judgments. So when a stimulus doesn't match your beliefs, then a negative judgment is created and the seed of anger is stimulated to grow. Since we all carry the seed of anger, we participate in the production of anger. Anger is not merely the other person's fault, but it's also our responsibility. By viewing anger this way and understanding the inevitability of this emotional experience as the seed of anger has been planted in all of us, we might be able to accept our experiences of anger more fully and respond in a more balanced way. So, what can be done to work with our anger and judgments that we tend to cast when differences arise between two or more parties? First, with anger, even though we might recognize that we are responsible for our anger, when the emotion is overwhelming, we can react in ways that may not be conducive to creating connections. In this case, the important thing to do is to pause. Anger, like any other emotion, comes and goes and changes, and what feels overwhelming can subside in a matter of minutes. In fact, research shows that it is good to wait for at least 20 minutes after anger is triggered. With this pause, it's possible to approach the matter with more clarity and calm. So, for example, when I receive an email that triggers anger, I make sure that I don't respond right away. I may write a response, but I do not hit send until I have slept overnight on the matter. Usually, when I go back to the email, I can respond in a calmer and kinder way than if I had written back right away. And what can we do about our tendency to judge? Well, the first thing to do is to notice that we are judging, which takes skills and mindfulness. This is like when you find yourself in an argument with your friend, for instance, rather than judging the other person as wrong or unreasonable and difficult, which can feed the argument even more. In the moment, you notice yourself judging the other person. It's like you step out of yourself and observe yourself looking through your lens. This sounds easy, but it's quite difficult to do as we tend to get caught up in our thoughts and emotions in the moment. So, a mindful person is aware that they are judging. They are aware that their judgments and realities are two different things, and they do not judge themselves for judging. Now, this is important. This step requires that you accept your tendency to judge as a natural human behavior and accept yourself for doing so. It's okay to judge. What's important is that you notice yourself doing so and do something about it. A mindful person can step out of judgments by entering the present moment again by bringing focus to their anchor. Now, creating this pause and awareness becomes easier with a daily practice of mindfulness. So, hopefully, this will give an incentive to continue or restart your regular mindfulness practice. Now, once you recognize yourself judging, it's important to tell yourself the following: many perspectives can be true, and other perspectives are information, and we can invite different perspectives to get more information. Now, there's a famous quote by Rumi, which is one of my favorites, that says, "Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field, and I'll meet you there." Now, we often get in the trap of wanting to be right and labeling whoever has opposing ideas to be wrong. This feels clear and safe. But being in the middle where you don't know who is right or who is wrong, or in fact, there is no right or wrong, but multiple perspectives coexist, even the ones that don't match your beliefs, how do you think such space would feel? It would feel rather uncomfortable, right? But it's about getting used to the discomfort of being in this space and understanding that reality is where multiple perspectives coexist, and that is our practice. This doesn't mean that once we practice saying the mantra, many perspectives can be true, that our judgments will cease to show up. It will. We'll be discussing in the later lessons how we can break our judgments down into forms that are more useful to create connections. So, when judgments show up, pay attention to the internal talk. Is it possible that the talk is biased to justify your position? What could be the other side of the story? Could this person be struggling in other ways? Notice your judgments and remember that everyone has a unique sense of reality. Notice your compulsion to be right and accept that multiple perspectives can be simultaneously true. And lastly, notice your compulsion to control and remember that many things in our lives are beyond our control and we may need to be more patient. So, in summary, we live in a world where no one person is the same, and there are some beautiful things that result from such diversity. But sometimes our opinions clash, which can lead to conflicts between individuals and groups. Judgments that we cast on each other and resulting uprising anger can exacerbate these conflicts and create more divisions and isolations. To act courageously in these times and extend compassion, it's important to notice the judgments that we cast on each other and recognize that multiple perspectives can be true at the same time. Also, it's important to take responsibility for the anger that shows up as a result of conflict and practice responding to anger with more clarity and calm simply by giving it more time to shift its form. With this initial practice to become aware of our judgments and emotions of anger, we're taking our first step to leading a life of more connections, support, and compassion. And this is important because life can become challenging for all of us from time to time, and we cannot live on our own. Now, in your practice this week, you'll be focusing on noticing your judgments and anger to further build your awareness. So, best wishes to you all.